If you take this approach of using this risk management report as an overall high-level summary, emphasizing those key conclusions, it'll serve two purposes. First, it'll send a very clear message to anybody who's reviewing it that you got everything under control. You know what you're doing, you got it under control. And second, it'll make your life much easier to update this report in future. Keep in mind, product life cycle can be very long. And during this product life cycle, there might be many design changes. And every design change potentially should trigger an update in your risk management report. So you may want to manage the life cycle aspect of the risk management report as well. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our weekly live discussion series. My name is Naveen Agarwal, and I'm again so happy to be with you once again. Today we're going to talk about risk management report, and actually this topic was suggested by one of our colleagues from our prior session. So I invite you to actually share your questions and topics of discussion for our future sessions, because I want to focus on topics and questions that are of interest to you. But let me very quickly remind all of you that this is going to be recorded, and nothing we discuss here should be taken as regulatory advice. We are here to just exchange ideas, challenges, and common best practices. So having said that, let's jump right into it. We're going to talk about the risk management report, which arguably is probably one of the most important deliverables of your risk management process for a particular product or a family of products that are covered by your risk management plan. And it is a very important part of the risk management file. So we want to make sure that it is done in a good way. It is useful, it is very clear and concise. So we're going to talk about all those. What are some of the attributes of a good risk management report? But I want to hear from you. I know that you have a lot of good ideas about this, a lot of good experience, and you have your own insights that we should all share together. So I encourage you to share all those in the Q&A box anytime, or ask any question. So let's keep it very free-flowing, very interactive, very engaging dialogue. It's going to be more about sharing these best practices so all of us can learn from each other. So having said that, let's quickly remind ourselves about the requirements. So if you look at ISO 14971 requirements for a risk management review in clause 9, it really asks us to do three things. Number one, we have done the risk management plan. We have executed the risk management plan appropriately, and all activities that we identified in our risk management plan have been carried out appropriately and completely. If there are any deviations, we should talk about those and justify those, have a good rationale about those. Number two is that our overall risk is acceptable based on the method and the criteria that we established in the risk management plan. And number three is that we have good plans in place for the production and the post-production phase of our product. Those are the three things that it requires us to do. We can meet these requirements in many different ways. So first of all, let's talk about what the risk management report is used for and who uses it. Who is the target audience for a risk management report? And while we think about this question, I want to actually ask you a very quick poll question, just to get a sense of, from your experience, who might be overall responsible for a risk management report. So I will launch this poll quickly, and I really appreciate your responses to this. If you are working in a company, this is most suitable to you. If you are an independent consultant, use your prior experience and share your most common observation. This question is about who has primary responsibility for risk management in your organization, because that will inform our awareness of who is potentially responsible for the risk management report as a deliverable for their role in this whole process. So please share your responses in this poll. And again, if you are an independent consultant, please mark a choice based on your cumulative professional experience, what you have seen in the industry. So Many of you have already answered this question, and looks like a lot of you have a dedicated risk management function. In some cases, it is led by R&D, and in some cases led by quality and regulatory together. So this is consistent with my prior experience as well. Sometimes we see a dedicated risk management function as a risk management team in place. They support different business units, or within a business unit you might have a dedicated risk management function. But in a vast majority of cases, risk management activities are really led by quality and regulatory functions. Sometimes R&D, as you guys have shared here as well. So whoever is leading the risk management activities is most likely the one overall responsible for creating and maintaining the risk management report. So please share in your comments here any best practices that you have come across about the risk management report, what a good risk management report looks like. I reviewed the requirements with you. So let me just share with you some of my reflections on this topic. Most importantly, it is an outcome of the process, and it's at a higher level, meaning it's a summary of everything, key results, key conclusions. It should be very simple and concise. It should not have too many details, but it should make references to the underlying documents that will provide those details when somebody wants to really review them. So I'll review with you some of the contents, almost like a table of content, which has worked well for me in my experience. Let me start with actually one question that was submitted at the time of registration, which I really would encourage all of you to submit a question and your comments at the time of registration, because I really want to focus my conversation today on those questions. So this question was submitted, which is like this: should the risk management report list certain risks that may need closer monitoring during post-production due to their likely significant impact on clinical claims and hence the benefit risk analysis? So it's a good question. We are wondering if we should really specify some of those individual risk items that may require more monitoring. So let's review that question when we talk about the plans for production and post-production phase. But in the meantime, if any one of you have any thoughts and ideas about that, please share that. Bijan, you are sharing here that the risk management report should be concise, transparent, and factual. Very good points there. Because let's look at it this way: who is the primary customer of our risk management report related to a specific device or a family of device covered by the plan? Who is the primary customer? If we take a step back and think about it, this is really meant for the consumption of our external stakeholders. We want to communicate to them very clearly and precisely the outcome of our risk management activities, and most importantly, communicate to them the message that the overall risk is acceptable and the benefit risk is favorable. So it should present this argument in a very simple, concise, persuasive way. That's the end goal. Now, some of the customers could be new team members who come on board, right? Product life cycle can be very long, and the people who are involved in the early part of product development and launch may not be there when the product is fairly mature, it's in the marketplace. But everybody internally might have a need to review the risk management report, especially when they see some changes being reported as part of the post-market process. So that is another customer. New team members, maybe new stakeholders inside the company. So it's consumption at different levels, but the idea is at a very high level communicate the results of our risk management activities in a clear, transparent way. Bijan, you are also sharing here that the RMR should mention those risks that should be monitored in the post-market phase. This supports transparency. Great. So that was a good response to the question. We should be transparent about them. Now, there might be debate about how best to do it, how best to reflect that level of transparency. Should it be in the main body of the report? Should it be as an addendum or an appendix? Should it be part of your post-market surveillance plans for the product? How best to do it? But the key point here is that be transparent and be clear about our actions and plans that could be appropriate in the context of the risk management report. So continuing on the conversation of who the customers are, really primarily it's an external facing group who may have a need to review the outcome of your risk management process. And these could be regulatory authorities, these could be auditors, these could be inspectors. They may actually want to start at the risk management report level. So completeness and concise nature of information supported by all appropriate references would be a good place to show them the rigor and the thoroughness of your risk management activities, right? Their inquiry, further inquiry may actually be initiated by some missing information, some unclear information presented in the risk management report. So if the risk management report is complete, concise, and transparent, as Bijan, you have shared here, that is a good place to start. You're also sharing here that the clinical evaluators would also benefit from the risk management report. Absolutely. Okay, so let's think about a potential table of contents, right? We should definitely identify the device or the family of devices that is covered by the risk management report, and there should be one-to-one correspondence between what you identified in the risk management plan and the risk management report. In addition, you might consider giving references to the tech file, or let's say maybe the specification or the DMR. I have seen those references being made in the very first section of the risk management report to further provide linkages to other documents. I've seen that happen. And then you might go into really your overall risk management activities, the planned risk management activities. What deliverables were planned and what outputs were produced? Maybe you provide a simple table that matches the planned deliverables from the risk management plan and the reference to an output record matching that planned deliverable. Maybe you provide a table like that. But most importantly, you need to summarize the outcome of your risk management activities, and that could be a section by itself. In that section, my experience is that it's important to make sure that you are addressing the key elements of the risk management process as outlined in ISO 14971. So your risk analysis, your risk evaluation, your risk control activities. A key question about risk control activities would be your thought process, your decision-making process about prioritization of your risk control options. Transparency can come into play there, that if you have considered all inherently safe design and manufacture related risk controls first, then moving on to the second priority, which is protective measures, and then the third priority for information for safety, how have you made those decisions, those trade-offs during your risk control options analysis, would be a very good thing to mention in a summary form in the risk management report. Another question about risk controls could be any new hazards or hazardous situations that may have been introduced because of the implementation of those risk control measures. How did you analyze that? And what additional actions did you take? That could be important to highlight, again, in the name of transparency, to be able to show that your process is quite robust and rigorous. And that could be a summary statement supported by another additional referenced report that may have more detailed analysis and actions related to those new hazards and hazardous situations, right? So you could do that. I think the whole idea is provide a summary and conclusion of each activity in a very concise way and support that with some additional documentation. Ed, you have a comment here that in the standard, the intent of the RMR is a report to top management to indicate that the product is ready to release from risk management perspective. Many make this too complicated. Remember, top management usually reads the first page, if that. Usually a table, as you suggest, is a way to reference the other information. The most important point that you are making, Ed, here is that the risk management report must be complete and approved prior to commercialization. That is actually mentioned in the standard. It is a requirement of clause 9 that a risk management review must happen prior to commercialization, and the risk management report actually is the evidence of that risk management review. So you are right. So maybe a good recommendation here would be a table of content and an executive summary right in the front. And then you can go into these details section by section, starting with the product description, linkages to tech file potentially, then starting with the overview of your risk management activities in a table form where you should link every planned deliverable to a reference to a record, just a table format. and then you should summarize your outcome of those risk management activities, paying close attention to things like decision-making process for risk control options, decision-making process about new risks introduced because of implemented controls, and that could be provided in a summary statement. Now let's talk about the most important part of this, right? At the end of the day, we have to demonstrate that our individual residual risks are acceptable, and if not, we have done benefit risk, and our overall residual risk is acceptable, right? That's one of the most important results we expect from our risk management activities. So you may have to pay special attention to that. So one of the practices I have recommended is that on a risk matrix, which could be a 5x5 risk matrix, 5 levels for severity, 5 levels for probability, you map each individual risk item, maybe its identification number from your risk trace matrix. You can indicate where each individual risk is falling at the end of all implemented controls. You could show that as a visual to describe, to illustrate that your individual residual risks are acceptable, and those which are not acceptable, you have done a benefit risk evaluation for those, and you could reference a report for the individual benefit risk analysis for those risks. And you are adding another statement here: all the additional information is not required by the standard, just answer to the 3 questions in clause 9. Yes, you could do that as a basic requirement, but you could also plan to include a summary of these types of information to provide to serve other stakeholders. Remember, we have many other stakeholders. So let's talk about the overall residual risk acceptability. Remember, you would have planned a method and criteria for the overall residual risk evaluation upfront in the risk management plan. So make sure you are consistent with that approach. It might be a good idea to summarize your approach in a very concise way as a starting point, and then you can summarize your overall conclusions. And it's very important to make a very formal statement about the overall residual risk acceptability. It should be yes or no. Is it acceptable or not? A very formal statement, a clear statement is, in my experience, very important. And then you can provide a supporting documentation as a reference where you might have done more detailed analysis. Last week we talked about benefit risk evaluation, and it's a subjective process in most cases. It requires a lot of judgment. It may use some data and information, but at the end of the day, it's a balancing act. So how did you do that balancing act? What criteria did you use? I shared with you the FDA guidance, which provides actually a worksheet. If you choose to use that worksheet, you may attach the completed worksheet in an appendix or in a separate report and give a reference to that particular analysis in your overall risk management report. And you are making another comment here. The enumerated matrix, as you describe, is very useful overall residual risk. Yes, and many times we make it a little bit too complicated than it needs to be. Let's take a step back, right? If we have done all we could, we have submitted our regulatory submission, and we are even received approval and clearance, which you should have before commercialization, right? If those answers are yes, then your overall benefit risk is obviously acceptable. So you may have to figure out how to provide that information in a concise, clear way and a conclusion in a persuasive way. And of course, supported by detailed analysis in a referenced document. So keep it simple, but make a very explicit, formal, clear statement that your analysis and evaluation has indicated that the overall residual risk is acceptable. It should match the method and criteria that you laid out in the risk management plan, right? But you should make a very explicit statement so that there's no confusion about it. Now, I recommend to people that even after this, so you have a section on overall residual risk acceptability, even after this, have another subsection of benefit risk evaluation as a very formal section. And that is where you could make a more clinical argument supporting your conclusion of the overall residual risk acceptability. It has worked very well in my experience, where it's just a paragraph which provides a lot of clinical information, clinical context, and wherever applicable, some information, some quantitative information of potentially, let's say, observed or expected rates of adverse events. As an example, you could include some relevant numbers, some relevant statistics to create a better support for your benefit risk evaluation summary. So I recommend that you have an explicit section on benefit risk evaluation to further support your conclusions. And then finally, you have to outline your plans for the production and the post-production phase. Now, in this regard, there are two schools of thought. I have seen people referencing their existing post-market surveillance procedure as an overall procedure under which they will monitor this particular product which is covered by this particular risk management report. I've seen that happen. But in some cases, you may have to do more than that. In some cases, your overall company-wide post-market surveillance procedure, which supports your legacy products as well, may not be sufficient. This particular product may be different enough in its intended use or technological characteristics that it may require a little bit of hand-holding. In my experience, I utilize very effectively what I called safety surveillance plans at a product level or a product family level. And this may be relevant where you have a large portfolio of products within the same organization and all of them are supported by a common post-market surveillance procedure. But the product covered by this specific risk management report may require a little bit more attention, may require some additional data sources, may require some different analysis methods based on the type of data that will be available to you. However, what you could do is that you could create a transition plan. You could create a transition plan for this product to come out of that safety surveillance plan or a post-market plan, whatever you want to call it, and then fall under your regular post-market surveillance procedure. You could create that transition plan. So I strongly recommend you consider creating a product specific or a product family specific, and this should match with the risk management plan, however you are describing it. A plan in place with a transition date in mind based on certain criteria. You can outline those criteria in the plan. Now, it is not necessary to define all these details inside the report. It may be sufficient to provide a reference to that product specific post-market plan. And you could mention that we will be monitoring it and you'll be producing reports over time as part of that post-market plan for the product. And then when it's transition, you can make a statement in your report that now the product is covered by our general post-market safety process. Okay, Dignesh, looks like you have a question here or a comment. References to PMS plan, PMCF plan, PSUR plan, and clinical literature search plan should be considered for RMR. So all appropriate references that you think are relevant for you should be included because risk management report is the starting point. So I would hope to see a nice long table of references at the end where if I decided to pursue more detailed inquiry into any one of those references, I could easily select that reference and request that record to be provided to me. So keep in mind that the risk management report may also serve the needs of your auditors or your notified body auditors or even inspectors who come in to do inspection for you. So you may have to think ahead and say, how can we make their job easier? So Dignesh, the comment you are making is provide references. You don't have to include the content of those references in the risk management report. But you can provide that list of references which somebody could look into more detail and pick from, whatever they want to pursue. So guys, I hope this is useful discussion for you. Let me know if there are any other questions. Ed, looks like you have another comment. Sorry, I missed it. Ed, so you are saying that usability risks are part of the risk management process and should be part of risk analysis. CER is also part of risk analysis and PMSUR is part of post-market. So you see, you are building linkages between different activities and the outputs of those activities in these reports. So there are many other linked reports that should be used for referencing information. Maybe you extract some of the conclusion and summary from those reports to include in the main part of your risk management report. You could consider that. So if you take this approach of using this risk management report as an overall high-level summary, emphasizing those key conclusions, it'll serve two purposes. First, it'll send a very clear message to anybody who's reviewing it that you got everything under control. You know what you're doing, you got it under control. And second, it'll make your life much easier to update this report in future. Keep in mind, product life cycle can be very long. And during this product life cycle, there might be many design changes. And every design change potentially should trigger an update in your risk management report. So you may want to manage the life cycle aspect of the risk management report as well. One of the things you could do is that make this as part of your CAPA completion checklist. If you do all those activities as part of your CAPA process, maybe you have a checklist that the CAPA cannot be closed until all appropriate documentation has been updated. And that will make sure all the documentation is current and includes all the latest information. So guys, again, we are running close to our planned time. We usually discuss these topics for 30 minutes. That's why we pick a very specific topic. Again, let me know how you are feeling about these discussions. Are you getting value out of these? Keep giving me feedback. You will receive a short survey after this presentation is over, asking you for topics or questions for future session. You can use the same survey to give me feedback about your experience with these discussions, and invite your friends. The whole idea is to engage and collaborate with each other. So now, those of you who may not be already aware, I want to share with you some of these free resources. You can go to my website www.achieveexcel.com, free stuff, knowledge sharing forum, and you can also schedule a free 30-minute conversation with me. So I look forward to connecting with you again next week. We will pick a topic. I haven't decided what, but if any one of you have any ideas, shoot me a note or just complete that survey. We'll pick a topic for next week and we will see each other next week. So thank you again for joining, and I wish you a very good week ahead, and see you all next week.